On May 5, 1821, Napoleon Bonaparte died in exile on the island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic. Nearly 20 years later, in 1840, the British government granted French King Louis-Philippe permission to return Napoleon's body to his home country of France. Later that year, a state funeral was held for the late French emperor, after which Napoleon's remains were interred in a sarcophagus situated in a crypt under the dome of Les Invalides, where he lies to this day. The exiled emperor's return to France brought out great patriotic sentiment among the people, some of whom longed rather nostalgically for the return of a Bonapartist emperor to lead France to greatness. But Napoleon's image and historical legacy has remained a divisive topic among scholars and in popular opinion in the many years after his death. Was he a self-made man who rose up in the military, social and political ranks through his charismatic leadership and bold style of action? If so, did Napoleon perceive his rise to absolute power over France as a necessity in order to achieve needed reform and continued progress to a revolution that had stagnated into violence and chaos over the past decade? Or was Napoleon a ruthless, opportunistic autocrat who let his ego and lust for power get the better of him, taking advantage of the turbulent revolution for his own personal gain, and leading France into a series of wars that would cost countless lives? In this video, we will be examining the two sides of Napoleon Bonaparte's legacy, Napoleon the Reformer and Napoleon the Tyrant. This video is made possible thanks to the generous support of our YouTube members and patrons. Their contributions are the backbone of our work. As a token of our appreciation, our patrons and YouTube members enjoy 2 exclusive videos every week. Currently, they have access to a complete series on Xenophon's Anabasis, the First Punic War, History of Prussia, Italian Unification Wars, Risorgimento, and numerous other fun videos. Additionally, our Pacific War series is ongoing, and we're excited to announce the release of a new series on the Russo-Japanese War and Albigensian Crusades, and much more, exclusively for our backers. If you want to join this fantastic community, you can find the links in the video description and pinned comment. By becoming a patron or YouTube member, you'll gain access to exclusive videos, early access to all our public content, release schedules, wallpapers, and an invitation to our active Discord server where we engage in lively discussions. Your support is invaluable, and we sincerely thank you for making our work possible. Napoleon Bonaparte was fortunate to have been born in the time he was. When the French Revolution broke out in 1789, he was 20 years old, in a Europe that was experiencing the twilight and decline of the old dynastic monarchies, save for Great Britain. He personally claimed he was lucky to have been born into the lower nobility of Corsica, which allowed him easier access into the ranks of the Ancien Regime's exclusive aristocratic officer corps. And when the revolution erupted in 1789, his lower Corsican birth did not hinder his rise through the ranks of the new Republican army and government. His marriage to Parisian socialite Josephine de Beauharnais also gained him access to the moderate royalist faction within Paris, who would greatly assist him in his eventual ascension to power. Regarding the argument that Napoleon was a great reformer and self-made man, Napoleon would leave a lasting legacy throughout Europe through creating legal codexes and forging national identities which still exist to this day. When he became first consul of France after his coup over the Directory in 1799, he found himself running a legislature that was struggling to get by on even the basic necessities of governance. The Constitution of 1799 left much to be desired for ensuring a strong central government. Napoleon immediately set out to reorganize the government's executive branch, known as the Council of State. As first consul, he ensured that he was the most important of the 3 co-consuls, who in theory were supposed to be working together and sharing equal power over the council. Through his cunning, charismatic ways, he was able to take advantage of the distrust that many of the ministers in the council held for one another, reducing their power and greatly diminishing their role in governance by subdividing the various ministries. Although he mostly kept second-rate politicians in the ministry posts, Napoleon was ably assisted in running the executive by 2 invaluable statesmen, Charles-Maurice de Talleyrand-Périgord and Joseph Fouché, Napoleon's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Police respectively. The legislative branch of the Republic was in an even worse state than the executive when Napoleon took the office of First Consul. Through the 1799 constitution, the legislature was divided into 3 assemblies. There was a 60-man Senate, tasked with upholding the constitution and the laws of France. This body was filled with loyal followers and lackeys of Napoleon. Then there was the 100-seat tribunate, which prepared new laws and legislations on the suggestions of the Council of State. Finally, there was the legislative corps of 300 deputies, each selected from the various departments, who were to vote on proposed legislation, but without any chance for debate or discussion on the floor. The tribunate would prove the most difficult of the 3 for Napoleon to work with, opposing Napoleon's concordat with Rome and even rejecting the first draft of his proposed civil code. Napoleon wasted little time in reining in the legislature. As to the tribunate's resistance, he responded in 1803 by increasing the size of the Senate by a further 40 loyal members. He halved the sizes of both the tribunate and the legislative corps and declared that he alone would have the power to appoint the 2 presidents of the assemblies. The tribunate was abolished entirely within 4 years. Regarding the stability and public order of France, Napoleon ensured the happiness of the masses through several methods. He took great measures to assure the common folk that he was on their side, passing a revolutionary land settlement through the legislature. In this settlement, he secured the common peasants' loyalty by allowing them to retain their acres of lands originally seized from the church and nobility during the early phases of the revolution. He restored the confidence of the religious peasantry in the countryside by passing the Concordat with Rome. The Republican government of the French Revolution had urged the creation of a secular, non-religious state and society in France, but the Concordat with Rome restored the status of Roman Catholicism as France's predominant religion. In urban centres, Napoleon kept the masses happy through Roman-style bread and circuses. He was a great patron of the arts, particularly to suit his needs in the field of propaganda, where he sponsored great works of art by the French painter Jacques-Louis David, which glorified the ideals of the French Revolution, France's recent victories over the coalition armies of Europe, and of course Napoleon himself. Through his campaigns in Italy and Egypt, Napoleon pleased the people by adding to France's growing treasures in art and cultural collection. Priceless pieces of Renaissance art and ancient riches were looted from cities in Italy and tombs in Egypt and brought back to France to be displayed at the Louvre, Paris's newly repurposed public museum. For public works and infrastructure, Napoleon sponsored massive architectural projects in Paris that glorified his reign and the French Empire, such as the Arc de Triomphe and several new bridges over the Seine, each named for his great military victories. Napoleon also openly encouraged popular welfare, so long as it didn't conflict with current government policies and interests. Through his propaganda efforts, public and cultural works, and legislative measures that, on paper at least, supported the common people of France, he gained the support and loyalty of the masses for his many wars and campaigns. He would maintain the common people's full cooperation until the conscription measures in the later phases of Napoleon's reign deteriorated this relationship. Napoleon also went to great lengths to reform France's finances following the economic crises of the Revolution. The revolutionary government had already done much to do away with the burdensome taxation system of the Ancien Regime, and once again Napoleon's able subordinates in public office greatly assisted him in his financial reforms. Through the efforts of France's Minister of Finance, Martin-Michel Charles Godin, the Director of the Treasury, François Barbé-Marbois, and prominent French merchant Nicolas François, Count Molienne, Napoleon was able to increase the efficiency of tax assessment and collection throughout the state. Another important financial reform of Napoleon was his creation of the Bank of France in 1800, which was granted full control over issuing paper currency and responsibility in administering the national debt and interests. Through these financial reforms, France's economic situation improved vastly in the early 1800s, allowing the first consul to afford his expensive wars against the coalition armies of Europe. When it came to administrating France's overseas colonies in the Americas, Napoleon saw the futility in properly maintaining the country's overextended and isolated colonial territories. The success of the Haitian Revolution in the West Indies would lead him to give up on any ambitions he had of reviving a strong French power base in the New World. and he eventually sold off the expansive colony of Louisiana to the United States in the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, granting the French government vast sums of money to finance Napoleon's wars and reform projects. Reforms to the French economy also provided for the improvement of private business ventures. Full employment and the opening of foreign markets opened up lucrative new business opportunities for French merchants. However, when it came to overseas trading, Napoleon's economic policies failed miserably once hostilities renewed with Great Britain in 1803. Napoleon had tried to induce an economic blockade on the British Isles through a policy known as the Continental System, but enforcing this across the empire's rapidly expanding territories and markets was easier said than done, and the lucrative practice of smuggling British goods into continental European markets soon became commonplace. Despite this setback, government enforcement and supervision of the French economy produced great material wealth and prosperity to individual subjects in the empire. Perhaps the greatest and longest-lasting legacies of Napoleon's constructive work reforms was his implementation of a new civil code, commonly referred to as the Napoleonic Code. As first consul, he had taken a vested interest in reforming the faulty legal codex of the French Republic, and in 1800 he formed two commissions to review the law, which were later combined into a single body, run by second consul Jean-Jacques Régis de Cambacérès. The commission's proposals were passed to the Judicial Committee of the Council of State for review, before then being presented to Napoleon for final approval. Earlier attempts by the revolutionary government to reform France's legal system had greatly assisted Napoleon in his current efforts to implement the civil code. The basic tenets of the Civil Code, or Napoleonic Code, upheld the principles of toleration, equity, the value and sanctity of private property, and the central significance of patriarchal family values. Napoleon's Civil Code was publicized between 1802 and 1804, with further additions for commercial, criminal and penal codes adopted in 1807, 1808 and 1810. Napoleon's efforts to reform the legal codex of France had a lasting legacy on not just Europe, but legal systems everywhere, and elements of the Napoleonic Code are still in place in countries formerly controlled by the Empire, such as France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Italy, and regions of Germany. Through the examination of Napoleon Bonaparte's public, government, and legal reforms as First Consul and Emperor, it is clear to see that there were many positive aspects to Napoleon's reign. However, his rule did not come without drawbacks and scrutiny. Scholars and historians often debate the role Napoleon played directly in the series of highly destructive wars which ravaged Europe from 1792 to 1815, now known to history as the Napoleonic Wars. He was no pacifist and was certainly fond of war and conquest. According to Napoleonic historian David G. Chandler, during the 23-odd years of his active career, he fought no less than 60 battles. Between March 1804 and April 1815, it is estimated that around 2 million native-born Frenchmen saw active service in his many armies over the years. Total casualty estimates from the Napoleonic Wars change frequently and will probably never be fully known, but anywhere from as low as 450,000 to as high as 1,750,000 French and French allied troops were casualties of the war in this 11-year time span. Napoleon's actual degree of responsibility for the wars which bear his name are also highly debatable. Besides his invasions of Portugal, Spain and Russia, he was typically the defender, warding off invasions of his empire by the coalition armies. There is no doubt, however, that many of these invasions were provoked by the emperor himself. But to say that Napoleon was directly responsible for the wars of his age is a bit of a stretch. Britain, France and their allies had been fighting wars with one another for over a century prior to the revolution, and it's unlikely that, had Napoleon not risen to power, these frequent conflicts wouldn't have still continued. In terms of domestic affairs, Napoleon displayed tyrannical rule by overseeing a propaganda machine that glorified the French Empire and its emperor. Besides the previously mentioned propaganda art he sponsored, Napoleon's imperial government directly administered public education, which encouraged mathematics and science, but also banned most, if not all, liberal arts and forbade the teaching of modern history. Instead, the imperial public education system taught nationalistic propaganda about the period of Charlemagne and his Carolingian Empire that Napoleon sought to emulate in France. It's important to note that when Napoleon crowned himself emperor in 1804, he essentially turned his back on many of the ideals of the revolution he had fought for, and restored much of the autocratic rule he had fought against. When it comes to his tyranny in regards to foreign affairs, Napoleon's conquests and campaigns speak for themselves. His motivations to conquer vast amounts of territory in Germany, Iberia, and Russia were usually driven by his ego and lust for power. In the case of Spain and Portugal, Napoleon's reputation takes a great hit in these countries. In what would prove a serious miscalculation, Napoleon overthrew the Spanish Bourbon monarchy and placed his brother, Joseph Bonaparte, on the Spanish throne. Napoleon had looked down on Spain and her people as backwards, overly spiritual, and practically run by the Roman Catholic Church. His efforts to modernize Spain and Portugal were greatly opposed by the Spanish and Portuguese people, whom they saw as occupiers rather than liberators. Spanish resistance against Bonaparte's rule was violently suppressed in the Dos de Mayo uprising of May 2, 1808. Ultimately, it would take the aid of the British and 5 years of bloody campaigning in the Peninsular War before the French were driven out and the Bourbon monarchy restored. The war in Spain had been a costly blunder for Napoleon's empire, in both lives and expenses. By taking a closer look at Napoleon's role in the bloody conflicts that ravaged Europe from 1800 to 1815, it is clear to see his role as tyrant and dictator come out, and portray him as the ogre that coalition propaganda made him out to be. Opinion, both public and scholarly, on Napoleon's historical legacy is like a pendulum throughout the generations, constantly swinging in one direction or another. After the return of the emperor's body to Paris in 1840, the French people once more sought the return of the Bonapartes, and when his cousin, Napoleon III, formed the Second French Empire in 1852, he would openly encourage the positive image of his late uncle's reputation and legacy. Especially after the French defeat in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, the French people would look nostalgically on the times of France's greatness under Emperor Napoleon I. Generals across Europe would study his tactics and strategies to try and discover his secret to success on the battlefield. But after the horrors of World War I, public opinion would again shift towards Napoleon's contemporary depiction as a warmonger who spilled gallons of European blood in his personal pursuit of glory. After World War II, the pendulum swung back to centre, and Napoleon's image as either a great reformer or tyrant remains a debated topic to this day. As David Chandler states, the Earl of Clarendon's remarks on Oliver Cromwell perhaps best summarised Napoleon Bonaparte: a great bad man. We plan to cover the fascinating lives of history's other great leaders in the future, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.